They laughed when she walked into Fort Benning carrying nothing but a worn rifle case and her father's dog tags. They laughed harder when she refused to speak during the first week of training. But nobody was laughing the day she made the impossible shot that saved 12 lives and forced the entire command to see her differently. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us which city or country you're watching this video from. Sierra Matthews didn't grow up dreaming of becoming a soldier. She grew up in the silence of the Montana wilderness, where her father, a decorated army ranger turned hunting guide, taught her that words were cheap and actions were everything. He'd lost his voice to throat cancer when Sierra was 15, and in those final 3 years, they communicated through gestures, written notes, and the language of the mountains. When he passed, Sierra found herself unable to speak for months. The grief had stolen her voice in a way that felt permanent, like her father had taken a piece of her ability to connect with the world. She was 23 when she finally decided to enlist, not because she found her voice again, she hadn't, but because she found her purpose. Her father's journals, discovered in a lockbox after his death, revealed a man who believed that the greatest strength wasn't in commanding others, but in perfecting yourself so completely that your presence alone could change outcomes. He wrote about soldiers he'd served with who never shouted, never boasted, but whose skills spoke louder than any words ever could. Sierra realized that she didn't need to speak to honor him. She needed to become the kind of soldier he described, one whose silence was filled with competence, so undeniable that it commanded respect. The army recruiters didn't know what to make of her. She communicated through a small notepad and pen, writing her answers with surprising wit and intelligence. Her ASVAB scores were exceptional, particularly in spatial, reasoning and marksmanship predictors. When asked why she wanted to join the Rangers, she wrote simply, "To be the shot that ends the fight before it begins." The recruiter, a grizzled sergeant named Morrison, looked at her for a long moment before stamping her application approved. Something in her eyes told him she wasn't running from her silence. She was weaponizing it. Ranger School at 40. Benning was a brutal awakening. From day one, Sierra faced a unique challenge that her male counterparts didn't, proving she belonged without the ability to verbally defend herself. The physical demands were immense. 20-mile rucks, endless push-ups, obstacle courses that seemed designed to break spirits before bodies. But Sierra discovered that her silence gave her an unexpected advantage. While others wasted energy, complaining, arguing, or psyching themselves up with bravado, she simply moved. Her face never showed strain. Her breath stayed controlled. She became a ghost in combat boots, present but unknowable. The instructors didn't know how to handle her. Staff Sergeant Brennan, a loud Texan who believed that volume equaled leadership, tried everything to break her silence. He'd scream in her face during inspections, demanding verbal responses to his questions. Sierra would simply hand him her notepad with crisp, correct answers. He'd make her do extra PT, hoping exhaustion would crack her composure. She'd complete every exercise with mechanical precision, her face blank. The other trainees watched these exchanges with a mixture of awe and discomfort. Some admired her resilience. Others thought she was making everyone look bad by refusing to play the game, but it was during weapons qualification that Sierra's true nature emerged. The shooting range was where soldiers revealed their character. Some froze under the pressure of evaluation, others compensated with false confidence. Sierra approached the firing line like she was walking into church. She moved with ritualistic precision, checking her M4 with gentle, knowing hands. When the targets appeared at various distances, she didn't rush. Each shot was deliberate, almost meditative. The silence between her rounds felt heavier than the noise from other lanes. When the rangemaster called ceasefire and checked the targets, his expression shifted from skepticism to shock. Every single shot, all 40 rounds, had found center mass, not just passing marks, but groupings so tight they looked like single holes punched through the paper. Word spread quickly through the training company. The silent girl from Montana could shoot like no one they'd ever seen. But admiration came with resentment. A group of male trainees, led by a former college football player named Derek Hutchins, began a campaign of subtle harassment. They'd hide her gear before morning formation, forcing her to show up with missing equipment. They'd crowd her during meal times, making loud jokes about special treatment and diversity quotas. Because Sierra never responded verbally, never reported them, they grew bolder. Hutchins started a rumor that she was only there because of political correctness, that the army was going soft by letting women into ranger school, especially ones who couldn't even talk. The psychological warfare escalated during the mountain phase at Camp Merrill in Georgia. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep climbs, dense forests, and constant rain that turned everything into slippery misery. During a night navigation exercise, Hutchins deliberately gave Sierra wrong grid coordinates for the rendezvous point, sending her miles off course. She realized the deception within the first kilometer, but said nothing. Instead, she recalculated, used the stars and terrain features her father had taught her to read, and arrived at the actual rendezvous before Hutchins's own team. When the instructors asked how she corrected course without a functioning GPS, which Hutchins had also sabotaged, she simply pointed to the sky, then her compass, then tapped her temple. The instructor, a weathered ranger named Martinez, smiled slightly. He'd been watching her closer than she knew. The breaking point came during a live fire training exercise in the Florida phase. The scenario was designed to simulate a hostage rescue. Teams had to clear a mock village while distinguishing between hostile targets and civilian cutouts. Hutchins's team went first, and their execution was sloppy but passable. When Sierra's team prepared to run the course, Hutchins whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Let's see if the mute can actually lead under pressure." Sierra had been assigned team leader for this exercise, communicating commands through hand signals and written quick notes that her team had learned to read instantly. Her team moved through the village like water, fluid, silent, efficient. Sierra's hand signals were so clear that her teammates anticipated movements before she completed them. At the final building, they encountered the hardest challenge. 3 hostile targets mixed among 4 civilians in a dim room, all positioned at varying depths. The shot window was narrow, less than 3 seconds before the hostages would be executed according to the scenario rules. Most teams failed this stage or took civilian casualties. Sierra raised her fist, the signal to hold. Her team froze. She moved forward alone, her rifle raised, and in the space of 2 heartbeats fired 3 rounds. 3 hostile targets dropped with headshots, 0 civilian casualties. The range safety officer had due to check the targets twice, unable to believe the precision under pressure. Staff Sergeant Brennan, watching from the control tower, keyed his radio to the other instructors. "Did you see that?" Martinez responded quietly. "I've been seeing it for weeks. You've just been too loud to notice." But Sierra's demonstration of skill, rather than ending the harassment, intensified it. Hutchins couldn't accept being outperformed. During a rare moment of downtime, he cornered Sierra in the equipment shed, his face red with anger and humiliation. "You think you're better than us. You think your little silent act makes you special." He shoved her backward into a wall. Sierra's eyes didn't show fear, they showed calculation. She could have defended herself easily. Her father had taught her more than shooting. But she also understood that physical retaliation would give Hutchins exactly what he wanted, a reason to claim she was unstable, dangerous, a liability. So she did something that shocked him more than any counterattack. She pulled out her notepad and wrote, "I don't think I'm better, I'm just different, and that terrifies you." Hutchins snatched the notepad and tore it in half, throwing the pieces at her feet. "You don't belong here. You're making a mockery of everything the Rangers stand for." Sierra bent down, picked up the torn pages, and walked past him without looking back. That night, she requested a meeting with the command staff. Using a borrowed notepad, she detailed every incident of harassment, not to file charges but to put it on record. She ended her written statement with, "I don't need protection, I need the opportunity to prove that silence doesn't equal weakness. Give me one chance." The opportunity came sooner than anyone expected. During the final phase of training, a grueling 48-hour field exercise that would determine who earned the Ranger tab, Sierra's company was tasked with a simulated direct action raid on a fortified position. The scenario was designed to be nearly impossible. A small team had to infiltrate, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected by a much larger opposing force. Most classes had a 60% failure rate on this exercise. The instructors assigned Sierra as the primary scout, a role that required navigating miles of hostile territory alone, gathering actionable intelligence and reporting. Back without being compromised, she moved through the darkness like smoke, using every technique her father had taught her about reading the land. She found the enemy position, catalogued their numbers, identified their weakest defensive point, and began her extraction. But as she moved through a dense thicket, she heard something that wasn't part of the exercise. Real voices, panicked and young. 50 meters off the designated training area, she discovered 2 actual lost hikers. College students who'd wandered off a trail and become disoriented in the dark. One had a badly sprained ankle and couldn't walk. The training area was miles from the nearest road, and the temperature was dropping fast. Sierra faced an impossible choice. If she broke exercise protocol to help the civilians, she'd fail the final test and likely wash out of ranger school. Months of suffering of proving herself would end in failure. But if she left them, they might not survive the night. She didn't hesitate. She activated her emergency beacon, an action that would immediately alert instructors and end her exercise, and began rendering first aid. Within 20 minutes, a safety helicopter arrived, the lead. Instructor, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, descended from the bird, ready to reprimand whoever had triggered a false alarm. Instead, he found Sierra applying a splint to the hiker's ankle, her own jacket wrapped around the hypothermic girl, while she'd used her tactical knowledge to build a small heat-reflective shelter. Hayes recognized immediately what had happened. He looked at Sierra, who stood at attention, muddy and shivering, awaiting judgment. "You knew this would end your exercise," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question." Sierra nodded. "And you did it anyway." Another nod. Hayes looked at her for a long moment, then said something that surprised everyone within earshot. "That's exactly what a ranger would do. You didn't fail, Matthews. You passed the only test that really matters." The hikers were evacuated safely. Sierra was allowed to rejoin her team with full credit for the exercise. When the final results were posted, her name was on the list of graduates. But more than that, her actions had sparked a conversation among the Ranger School cadre. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes made it part of his mission to ensure that her story, though kept confidential in specifics, became a teaching point about the true meaning of the Ranger. Creed that the mission includes protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even at personal cost. Graduation day arrived with crisp autumn sunshine. Sierra stood in formation wearing the tan beret and Ranger tab she'd earned. Her mother had flown in from Montana, her eyes red from crying before the ceremony even started. As the graduating class was called forward individually, Staff Sergeant Brennan, who'd spent weeks trying to break Sierra's silence, stood at the podium. When Sierra's name was called, he did something unprecedented. He stepped down from the podium, walked directly to her, and instead of just handing her the certificate, he saluted first. A superior officer saluting an enlisted soldier was a reversal of protocol that made everyone in attendance take notice. Brennan's voice carried across the field. "Ranger Matthews, I spent 3 months trying to make you into the soldier I thought you should be. It took me that long to realize you were already the soldier we all should aspire to become. Your silence taught me to listen. Your actions taught me to watch for what really matters. I'm honored to award you this tab." He pinned the Ranger tab to her uniform himself, and as he did, the entire graduating class, the instructor cadre, and even Lieutenant Colonel Hayes stood at attention in spontaneous respect. Sierra's mother approached her after the ceremony, tears streaming down her face. She handed Sierra an envelope, another letter from her father, one he'd written before he died, but instructed her mother to deliver only if Sierra earned the Ranger tab. With shaking hands, Sierra opened it. Her father's familiar handwriting filled the page. "Sierra, if you're reading this, you've done something I always knew you could, but hoped you'd have the courage to attempt. You've proven that strength isn't about volume, it's about conviction. I lost my voice to cancer, but I never lost my ability to make a difference. You lost your voice to grief, but you've turned that loss into a different kind of power. You don't need words to lead. You need presence, skill, and the moral courage to do right, even when it costs you everything. I'm proud of you, not because you became a ranger, but because you stayed true to who you are in the process. Remember, the most important shots are the ones you don't take." The fights you prevent because your competence alone changes the calculation. Be that soldier. Love, Dad. Sierra read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling, tears falling onto the paper. For the first time since her father's funeral, she felt her throat loosen, felt words forming. She looked at her mother and in a voice rough from disuse but clear in purpose, whispered, "Thank you." 2 words, the first she'd spoken in over a year. Her mother collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Sierra held her, and in that moment realized that she didn't need to speak to be heard. But when she chose to speak, it would carry the weight of everything she'd held silent. Her first assignment as a ranger took her to the 75th Ranger Regiment at Fort Benning, where she was assigned as a designated marksman to a specialized reconnaissance team. Her reputation had preceded her, the silent ranger who'd outshot everyone in her class and saved civilians during final testing. Some welcomed her with respect. Others remained skeptical, believing the stories were exaggerated. Among the skeptics was her new platoon sergeant, a combat veteran named First Sergeant Kowalski, who'd served 6 deployments, and believed that Rangers were talkers and fighters, not mimes. Their first mission together was a training exercise in the Arizona desert, simulating a reconnaissance patrol in hostile territory. Sierra was assigned as the Overwatch sniper, positioned on a ridgeline while the main element maneuvered below. Her role was to provide early warning and precision fire support if the patrol encountered opposition. The exercise was meant to test communication protocols under stress, but when the opposing force sprung their ambush earlier than expected, the patrol's radio communications became chaos, everyone trying to talk at once, crucial information lost in the noise. Sierra, watching from 800 meters away, saw what the patrol couldn't, a flanking element moving to cut off their withdrawal route. She couldn't radio through the traffic, so she did what came naturally. She fired a single shot, not at a person, but at a metal target near the flanking element's position, creating a distinctive sound that immediately got everyone's attention. The radio chatter stopped. In the silence, she fired twice more in rapid succession, a prearranged signal meaning danger north. Sight. The patrol leader, Captain Mendez, understood instantly. He redirected his team, avoided the trap, and completed the extraction successfully. After the exercise, First Sergeant Kowalski approached Sierra, his expression unreadable. "That was either the smartest thing I've seen in 20 years or the dumbest, I can't decide which." Sierra pulled out her notepad. She still preferred writing. Most of the time, and wrote, "Sometimes the best communication is silence broken at exactly the right moment." Kowalski read it, looked at her sharply, then cracked a rare smile. "All right, Matthews, you might just survive in my platoon." Over the next 6 months, Sierra became an integral part of her team. Her silence was no longer seen as a weakness or peculiarity. It became her signature, a trait. Her teammates learned to read and trust. She developed a comprehensive system of hand signals and written shorthand that allowed her to communicate complex tactical information faster than radio chatter. During close-quarters training, her team could execute entire building clearances in near-total silence, coordinating through Sierra's precise gestures. Other platoons began requesting to train with her unit, wanting to learn the Matthews method of silent communication. But the true test came when her unit received deployment orders to an undisclosed location for a real-world mission. The specifics were classified, but the essence was clear. Intelligence gathering in an area where American forces weren't supposed to be operating. Silence wasn't just tactical, it was survival. Sierra's skills were about to be tested in an environment where a single word could mean death for her entire team. The night before deployment, Captain Mendez called her into his office. "Matthews, I'm putting you as assistant team leader for this operation. I need someone who won't panic under pressure, who can think clearly when everything goes to hell. Your silence has taught this team discipline. Now, I need you to help lead them through the real thing." Sierra nodded, then wrote, "I won't let them down." Mendez looked at her seriously. "I know you won't. That's why I chose you." As Sierra left his office, she felt the weight of her father's dog tags around her neck. A reminder that leadership wasn't about commanding the loudest voice in the room. It was about being the calmest presence when everyone else was falling apart. She'd spent years learning to turn her silence into strength. Now she'd discover if that strength could bring her team home alive. The deployment lasted 4 months. The missions were intense, dangerous, and precisely the kind of work where Sierra's unique skills proved invaluable. Her ability to move silently, to observe without being observed, and to make split-second decisions without needing verbal confirmation made her an asset beyond conventional measurements. There were moments of terror, near compromises, equipment failures, the ever-present knowledge that capture would mean death. But through it all, Sierra remained the steady center of her team's operations. On their final mission, the team encountered an unexpected situation. A civilian vehicle broke down near their observation post, a family with 2 young children stranded in a dangerous area. As darkness fell, the rules of engagement were clear. Maintain position, avoid contact with civilians, complete the mission. But Sierra saw the children's faces, remembered the hikers she'd helped during ranger school, and understood that some rules existed to be broken when human life hung in the balance. She signaled to Captain Mendez, pointed to the family, then to her watch indicating they could spare 15 minutes to render aid without compromising the mission timeline. Mendez hesitated, the weight of command evident on his face. Then he looked at Sierra and saw something in her eyes that made his decision clear. He nodded. Sierra and 2 teammates quickly approached the vehicle, determined the mechanical issue, and made a field repair using their own equipment. The family never knew they'd been helped by American soldiers. The Rangers disappeared back into the shadows before the father could even offer thanks, but Sierra knew, and it mattered. When they returned stateside, the unit's performance evaluations were exceptional. Sierra received a commendation for her actions during deployment, though the specific details remained classified. More importantly, she'd earned something that no medal could represent: the complete trust and respect of every person she'd served with. The soldier who couldn't speak had become one of the most effective communicators in the regiment, proving that leadership wasn't about volume, it was about presence, competence, and the moral courage to do right regardless of cost. 3 years after graduating Ranger School, Sierra received an invitation to return as a guest instructor, specifically to teach a class on alternative communication methods in tactical environments. Standing before a new generation of Ranger candidates, she felt the familiar weight of expectation. Staff Sergeant Brennan introduced her, his voice carrying pride. "This is Ranger Matthews. Some of you may have heard stories about her. I'm here to tell you those stories don't do her justice. She's going to teach you something that no manual can. That strength isn't about how loud you can yell. It's about how effectively you can lead when words fail." Sierra stood before the class and, for the first time in her military career, chose to speak. At length, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "My father taught me that every word should have a purpose. Every action should have meaning. I spent years learning to communicate without speaking because grief took my voice. But silence gave me something unexpected. It taught me to listen, truly listen, to what people aren't saying. It taught me that the most powerful presence in a room isn't always the loudest person. Sometimes it's the one who speaks only when they have something worth saying." She paused, looking at the faces of the candidates, men and women of all backgrounds, all struggling with their own doubts and challenges. "You're going to face people who doubt you. Some will doubt your strength, your intelligence, your right to be here. Don't waste energy arguing with them. Show them. Let your actions be so undeniable that words become irrelevant. And remember this: the greatest shot a sniper can take is the one that prevents a battle from happening at all. Be so good at what you do that your presence alone changes the equation. That's what it means to be a Ranger." The room was silent. Then, slowly, one candidate began to clap. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire class was on their feet in applause. Sierra felt tears threatening but held them back. She'd spent years proving that silence could be strength. Now she discovered that knowing when to speak was its own kind of power. After the class, a young female candidate approached Sierra hesitantly. "Ranger Matthews, can I ask you something?" Sierra nodded. "How did you deal with the doubt? The people who thought you didn't belong?" Sierra considered the question carefully, then responded, "I stopped trying to convince them with words. I let my work speak for itself, and I found that the people whose opinions truly mattered, the ones who judged me on competence rather than expectations, Those people saw me clearly from the beginning. The others eventually came. Around or they didn't. Either way, I kept moving forward. The young woman's eyes filled with determination. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Sierra smiled slightly. One more thing. Don't let anyone tell you that being different is a weakness. I'm a better soldier because of my silence, not despite it. Your unique perspective, whatever it is, might be exactly what your team needs. Trust yourself. The candidate saluted, crisp and precise. Sierra returned it, seeing in this young woman the same fire that had carried her through her darkest moments. That evening, Sierra visited her father's grave in Montana for the first time since her deployment. She placed her ranger tab on the headstone, along with a letter she'd written to him. In it, she detailed everything she'd learned, everyone she'd helped, every moment when his teachings had saved her or her teammates. She ended the letter with, "Dad, you taught me that silence could be powerful, but you also taught me that words, when used wisely, could change everything. I've found my voice again, but I only use it when it matters. Thank you for showing me that strength comes in many forms. I hope I've made you proud. I know I've become the soldier you always believed I could be." As she stood to leave, she noticed a man in an army uniform standing respectfully at a distance. He approached slowly, and she recognized him immediately. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, the officer who'd overseen her Ranger School graduation. "Ranger Matthews," he said warmly, "I heard you were in town. I wanted to tell you something. I didn't get a chance to say at graduation." Sierra waited, curious. "Your father and I served together in the Rangers 30 years ago. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever knew. When you showed up at Fort Benning, I recognized your name immediately. I've been watching your career closely, not because I doubted you, but because I wanted to see if you'd inherited his best qualities." Hayes's voice grew thick with emotion. "He'd be so proud of you, Sierra. Not just because you became a ranger, but because you did it your way. You didn't try to be him. You became the best version of yourself. That takes more courage than any firefight." Sierra felt tears streaming down her face now, unable to hold them back. Hayes continued, "Your father once told me that the greatest warriors aren't the ones who seek glory. They're the ones who do what's right when no one's watching, who sacrifice personal gain for the good of others, who lead by example rather than command. You've embodied every one of those principles. He would be honored to call you his daughter, and I'm honored to have watched you become one of the finest Rangers I've ever seen." Sierra found her voice, rough with emotion. "Thank you, sir. That means everything to me." Hayes saluted her, that same reversal of protocol that had stunned her at graduation. "The honor is mine, Ranger. Carry on." He walked away, leaving Sierra alone with her father's grave and the overwhelming sense that her journey had come full circle. She'd set out to honor his memory by becoming a soldier. She'd discovered that the greatest honor was becoming herself. If you believe that courage isn't measured by volume but by action, that strength comes in many forms, and that the most powerful voice is sometimes the one that chooses silence until the moment demands speech, comment, honor below. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their differences aren't weaknesses, they're superpowers waiting to be understood.